No, but the discussion itself is 10 minutes, but we have to make up the questions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. How many do we need? Like 5?
4. Let's make 4. Okay, Brian?
Okay.
Let's make 4 questions, okay, Brian?
Okay.
Yeah, I think the first
I
half
think
of the
first one
discussion was talking about how
Yeah.
we should treat the Fed not as like a institution of like numbers and finances, but of like psychology of the people. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, sure. So emotion versus data.
Yeah. So do you think the Fed can do you think the Fed can revolve as a people's institution, not a numbers institution?
Yeah.
How do you word that better?
I just wrote emotion versus data in the Fed.
Okay. We'll just do that one. Emotion versus data in the Fed. Second one. Brian, you have any ideas?
Maybe we can talk about like I don't know, it might be similar to your question about the emotion versus data, but it frequently mentions about how economics is actually much more than just looking into like numbers and the economy, but rather it should be primarily focused on people and their response. So I don't know if this is similar to what you wanted to talk about in the first question, but maybe you can talk about why or how is the study of humans important in better understanding economics and potentially implementing better fiscal and monetary policies.
So why don't we write, how does the study of sociology affect economics?
Yeah.
For question 3, why don't we do like, how did the person's upbringing affect her ruling in the Fed? Dali.
Can we generalize it to how does all persons upbringing affect their
let's generalize it.
Okay, how does a person's upbringing do what?
Affect their economic views.
Okay, and last one. Because the last half of the podcast discussion was about the current economic status of the U.S. Let's do something about that one. Why do you think that people are scared of a recession right now, even when all the indicators are strong?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay.
Why do you think people are scared of a recession, even though stats point otherwise? Okay, I'm gonna show these questions, Mr. Miller. These are the questions, Mr. Miller. Okay, let's do it. Question number 1, emotion versus data in the Fed.
I personally think data is still more important. Primarily because, if you interview people and, just talk about their emotions and reactions to the policies that you're making, sure, it's a really big motivational boost for you to implement policies that help more people. But, first of all, that's not a good enough size that matches the level of the data that these people are getting from their research. I think interviewing people and talking about their emotions is less accurate than the data in terms of measuring how much a policy impacts a group of people. But second of all, I feel like emotion is much more biased. True. But data is really unbiased in showing what's working and what's not.
I feel like if we rely on data, even though if we rely on emotions and interviewing, then policies tend to be more geared towards the lower classes because obviously their stories are much more impactful. And I think this is kind of why there is a discrepancy between what President Trump wants, according to the podcast, and what the Fed is trying to implement, because President Trump is all about those profits. He's encouraging the Fed to drop interest rates because he wants more economic booms, more economic activity, while doing that's actually going to be harmful to some of the lower classes. So I think that's why there's a difference between what the Fed's doing and what Trump wants.
You're recording, screen recording, right?
Yeah, I'm recording it.
Okay. I kind of think that there's an intrinsic value to understanding emotions and looking into emotions, because I I agree that, like, as Joshua said, data is what really statistically and scientifically sort of looks into what policies would be efficient or effective in dealing with certain economic problems and solving and helping people with their daily lives. But so data is intrinsically quantitative in nature, and I do agree that that's good in pinpointing certain problems and finding a general direction as to how a policy should go. But in regards to specifics, I think that interviews, for example, like as the Mary Daly did for her setting up policies, she conducted interviews of people and got their opinions. I think that in that case, I think listening to people and their personal and specific opinions also can help in pinpointing like specific ways or specific problems to solve for those people. It's sort of like the public sector and private sector working together. The public sector or data sort of pinpoints the problem, and the private sector or the emotion or like the specific interviews sort of look and delve into more specific mechanisms that can be taken to satisfy citizens and their needs.
Let's move on to question 2. How does the study of sociology affect economics? So how does the study of people and how society functions affect the study of like economy? This is Brian's question. Brian, you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So basically, it's sort of mentioned in the podcast, but it talks about how ultimately, economics is, in order to make a good economic policy, you need to fully understand how it impacts humans um, and what reactions that the humans will have on that policy. And I think that study of humans is actually really important for something like economics, because economics is basically like the study of daily transactions and daily life decisions made by people. And in order to better understand economics, you need to better understand the behavior and the different factors associated with human like actions and behaviors. So I think the study of humans is really important, especially because economics is like a social science. So like socially, you need to understand the dynamic of humans and their activity and how they interact with society.
Didn't they make a policy called like the Fed Listens or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was pretty cool because it shows how they're actually listening. Because I feel like for other governmental institutions, there's no incentive to actually kind of become better. They just feel like they should do their job, you know, because there's no incentive. They're not going to get a higher salary or they're not going to get higher profits because they do their job better. But the fact that they're constantly improving shows that they actually care because, you know, even though their salary is not increasing, even though they're not getting more fame because they're making these new programs, they're still doing it. So I think that was pretty cool.
Mary Daly calls herself she calls herself a servant on multiple occasions. I felt like that was interesting because working in the government is often associated with like corruption and things like that. But for her to describe her job as a job that's for the people and like that she's a servant of the public good, I felt like I showed her like that are working to better the people, not to better themselves, which is, I guess, in line with what both of you guys are saying.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Question number 3. How does a person's upbringing affect their economic views? We are at 9 minutes right now. So how does a person's upbringing affect their economic views?
I think it goes without saying that, like, of course, it definitely affects your economic views.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you just think about Mary Daly, or Mary Daly, I forgot how the pronunciation went. But she talks about how in the beginning she went through a lot of problems that included like marital problems, which meant she had to live in her 7th grade substitute teacher's attic. And I feel like that story is really powerful in that she had to find financial independence at a young age.
Mm.
And for many people, that isn't a reality. So you don't really get to understand, you know, what it means to be in the lower quintiles of the social economic classes.
Yeah.
And I feel like since she can sympathize with them a lot more, she understands what troubles they're going through, and she knows, you know, exactly what problems that need to be fixed.
I think it's really cool
When
because
people,
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna like end it off by saying like, because the people who are now empowered know what the people need. I feel like that's really that's really profound.
Brian, you wanna go first?
Alright. If that's all you say, you can go first. I can talk next.
I think that America's foundation on the idea of the American dream, you know, everyone being able to make it. So, the fact that a high school dropout who who has gone through so many problems in her life is able to become the president of the Federal Reserve in San Francisco, like the fact that that has been achieved kind of shows the economic views that America should adopt as a whole, that anything is possible, and you know she's kind of a hallmark example of the American dream. So I think, putting the question aside, I think that was something I wanted to pinpoint in this discussion, that she's a very, very admirable individual for achieving what she has.
Yeah, basically, like Eugene said, like I think that's like an admirable trait that a lot of Americans look into, and that's the reason. So there's a reason why people like that. It's because obviously people and their upbringing and their background heavily impact their views and their understanding of different problems and social problems, and this idea of a self-made man or woman in which they experience the hardships that an everyday citizen experiences, and now works in a position in which they can have an influence in changing the lives of several people. I feel like that itself is a very admirable trait, and that also serves as evidence to prove how people understand that different backgrounds means that you have different perspectives and different understandings for, I guess, different types of people.
I guess taking a step back and generalizing the I guess issue of how a person's upbringings affect their economic views.
Mm-hmm.
I think if someone had a like financial instability when they were growing up, I think they're more I guess, as Mary Daly puts it, like comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that means that maybe when they grow up, their economic views are more conservative in terms of like not wanting like to like conservative as in not like conservative versus liberal, like conservative as in like being more conserving of their wealth. And as opposed to that, if you had financial stability when you were growing up, then you might be less disposed to save your money. So I think that in that way, like a marginal propensity to save and consume may vary depending on your upbringing.
Good econ terms.
Okay,
let's do the last question. Why do you think people are scared of a recession even though stats point otherwise? I think it's because people are inherently pessimistic, and then they expect the worst, and then they just want something to kind of prepare for it. They don't want to be caught off guard with a sudden recession, and I feel like this is a really bad thing, because as you know, as we talked about, if people are expecting a recession, they're going to save more, which is actually going to cause the recession. That's been brought up like 15 times in all the podcast discussions. So I think, is there any way that we can kind of remedy this apprehension to a recession and how it actually causes it? How do we stop that?
Yeah, so basically...
Okay, guys, the next group is going to be, because Sam didn't listen to instructions, it's going to be Yewan, Josh, Jenny, Matt, Leonard, and Sam. I'm going to send you a Google Hangouts invite. You need to be in there in the next 4 minutes.
Wait, Mr. Miller?
Okay.
Mr. Miller? Yes. I can't join.
I've noticed. We're going to try it again. Here we go.
Okay, wait, do it fast so we can end the call.
Okay, so so to wrap things up, I think, as the podcast said, it's just people are generously nervous, especially like if there's like a long period of economic prosperity, that there's a lot of uncertainty.
Jenny, you're doing your podcast discussion? Okay, we can put you in the 1040 group instead.
Nervous or scared.
Wait,
so I think a way to maybe remedy or make this better.
Wait, Mr. Miller, can I go now then?
I'm gonna mute them.
I have a question with Leonard.
So just mute the chat.
Do it. Okay, I muted them.
Yeah. So as I said, long prosperity means people are afraid and uncertain, and I think a way to remedy or make better of the uncertainty is by making people maybe understand better in regards to any economics and have a better understanding of how our world and how our economy runs. And if that's the case, then possibly uncertainty can be decreased.
Joshua, any last
All right,
thoughts?
thank you guys. I have to go now.
Okay, thank you guys.
Bye bye.